In our latest episode, we're going to be looking at attaching the magazine onto the Cobra. Stay tuned. Now, the model name for this particular magazine is the T23509, which is embossed into here, and of course, it's multi-shot. On this side, it points out 7 broadhead. It'll take target arrows as well as broadheads, and it has the name Killer Cobra on it. This is specifically designed for use with the aluminum frame Cobra Crossbow Pistol. It has a lever here which is spring-loaded, and the arrows get fed in through the top. This lever does not get any higher than that. So this is not one you can use with a speed loader. So if that's what you want, this is not going to be the model for you. However, I'm not concerned about that. And you can actually add extra ammunition as you're loading. One of the limitations of this is that it takes arrows or bolts that are between 16 centimeters and 16.5 centimeters in length. This works out at between 6.3 or 6.5 inches. So if you have ammunition that's longer than that, you're going to need to buy new ammunition. If your ammunition is short of that, same deal. But this size ammunition is not that difficult to get a hold of, and it'll work very nicely. You'll also see there's a bit of a Picatinny rail here, and we'll be attaching our sighting system to that. That will be the next episode. We're not going to bother with that today, but we're going to look at how to prepare the actual Cobra itself, physically mount this on, and we'll take a few test shots. This particular magazine, by the way, is actually 3D printed by a firm in Germany. They are available to purchase through eBay, and I'll have a link in the description. If, I will just warn you, you live outside of Germany, you will have to pay the tax on it as well as the cost of the magazine and the import. By the way, this is not the only magazine they carry. They do have another version for a different crossbow pistol, one that comes with a stock already attached to it, the Alligator, but we're not using that particular one, but it is available through them. And obviously you might want to have a look at that. If you live in a country where there's some difficulty in importing things relating to crossbows, might I suggest that you, when you order this, leave them a note to put on the customs form, just archery accessory, which is legitimately what this is, and that might get through customs a bit better. No promises. I don't know. I don't live in a country where this was a problem. Here in England, this got through customs no problem at all, but obviously I had to pay local taxes, making it a little bit more expensive. But yeah, decent construction, strong plastic. You wouldn't want to get this into too hot an environment because it is obviously being printed. It's a thermoplastic, but I don't really plan on throwing my crossbow into the fire, so I don't see that as much of an issue. Right. Let's get on and see what we can. So to begin with, we're going to have to remove the rear sighting system, and we'll start off by loosening this nut. And that allows us to remove most of the top portion of the sighting system. I'm going to save the bits in case I ever decide to put this back together again. And next we want to use an Allen wrench. Nope, wrong size. That one's a 2mm. We want to use an Allen wrench to unscrew from, oh, no, I was wrong. I was right the first time. Wants a 2.5. Or is this going to be awkward? Oh, it's going to be awkward. So as it turns out, this particular bolt requires an imperial rather than a metric hex key, and I didn't have any imperial rather than metric hex keys, so I had to buy some, which is why this has become delays, because thanks to the coronation, I wasn't able to pick this up until today, so it has meant a delay. However, once you have the right tool for the job, out it just drops. And incidentally, if you wanted to know, that was a 3/32 of an inch hex key. The 2mm and 2.5mm being respectively too small and too large to remove this component. But we've got that off now. Now I need to remove this spring, and as you may be able to see here, we're going to have to modify it. But first so I'm going to remove, there's a nut on this side and a bolt, so it's pretty straightforward stuff. But yeah, just unscrew that. The bolt and nut can now come apart. And the spring is now removed, and as you can see, it needs to be modified from this shape to that. So the modification starts with a big old pair of pliers, and this rather wiggly section, which operated the safety catch or kept it in its latched position, we need to actually cut off. So we're just going to trap that in the pliers, give it a squeeze while bending up and down a couple of times, and that comes right off. So that gives us this section here, which I'm going to quickly file down and make it a little less. So using the file on my Swiss Champ, I'm just gonna very quickly go over the sharp edges just a little, so no accidents occur in future relating this thing slicing me open. And that's already enough. So that's sorted. The next thing is we have to alter the shape here. Now, it's a little bit deceptive because it looks like we're having to bend this back a bit, but actually we're just mostly bending that up. And I'm going to use these pliers to do that. Now, that jaw is round, that is flat. It's a very, very good plier for bending metal. And we're gonna aim to bend it round about from the middle. And what we want is for the top bit to actually come back on itself a bit. And we're not quite there yet. And that's kind of there. Now, the way you could be sure you've bent it back on itself far enough is with the magazine itself. Now, there's a hole here that a screw will come and go through here. Now, that hole, by the way, I need to rebore to make it fully 4 millimeters in diameter. That I'll do separately. But the important thing is there is this little hole here through which the bolt will go through and will go through here, and it's going to affix this in place. But how do you know if you've bent it back enough? Well, inside the magazine, just where my little finger is pointing is a little step, and this end of the hook should sit on that step and the hole for the screw line up, forcing that little lump to protrude. If it's not far enough back, it won't sit on the step and it'll just kind of disappear into there. So if you have it so that it's bent back on itself sufficiently, and you can do it with regular needle nose pliers. You don't have to use the ones that I use, but I have this tool and it's a good tool, so I used it. But if you get it back just far enough so that the tip will sit on that step and the hole, so that's sitting on the step and the drill hole is lined up. Now again, I'm going to go away and just put a 4mm drill bit through that just to widen that out a bit, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so this component has been modified. I didn't bother to use a drill. I used a diamond needle file, and I basically made that hole fully 4mm, so an M4 bolt will actually fit through that now. Now, if I put that down and demonstrate, so I can screw that through there. Now, what we have removed would normally sit just above the safety, but instead it's actually going to be attached to this hole here, which will take an M4 or a 4mm bolt. Now again, this part has to curve back to sit on the step that's just there. And with a bit of experimentation that's been going on behind the scenes, I've discovered that what you want to do is bend that back on itself slightly, just enough, so that when you fit the edge of that into the step, that hole almost aligns. It's actually about 1/2 millimeter off, but if I press backwards, it will line up. If I now take my M4 bolt, and we want a 12mm long M4 bolt, and drop that in there, and give that a little bit of a screw, if you actually look in there, just enough to lock it in place, so that's now attached. That's under a small amount of tension. And the reason why this is under a small amount of tension is that if it's not, it can actually pop up past. And this is designed to prevent the arrows, the bolts, from doing weird things while you're cocking it. If it's in position, it works properly. If it's out of position, because it's not under enough tension, instead of loading new bolts into the crossbow, what will happen is they will fly out the top of the assembly, and that's not helpful. You'll also notice I've removed this assembly, and that's because we need to be able to screw down there, and it's helpful if there's nothing in the way. Also, on the front of the crossbow, I need to remove the foresight, and that just, if I just redirect the camera a bit, so that, once we undo the bolt and the nut, that just comes off. And we have a nut and bolt on the front of the magazine, which obviously needs to be removed, and we'll add those later. But there are a couple of grooves here, and these fit in perfectly that align everything. And so everything is now in position. So we now have to come back to that screw there. And what we want to do is just, it's a Phillips head screw I'm using, so I'm just using the Phillips head on my everyday carry here, my Swiss Champ that I have modified. And I'm just going to screw that in until it is firm. We don't want to make it too tight. We don't want to strip any threads out. But that is firmly in place. I'm now going to add our spring assembly. Now the spring drops in above this. Now you'll notice there's a little hook here. If you try to set it like this, it'll just jam everything up. You want the spring to be underneath there. So that is going to go under the spring, like so. And this pushes back into position. And I have the little bolt that was in there to begin with, and I'm going to start to screw that in till everything is sitting firmly, and then I'm just going to use my little hex tool to finish screwing it in the rest of the way. It's under some spring tension, so obviously you don't want to just force it through there. You just want to rotate it in, and you don't want to make it too tight because, again, you don't want, if you make it too tight, that won't work well. But as soon as you feel any resistance, you're okay. Now, this piece of metal was on the tail end of what we've just screwed in there, and that kept the safety either in the forward or rear position. That's no longer in there, so there are going to be some issues with the safety, which we'll get to. Beyond that, I now need to take my slightly longer nut and bolt, push that in the rest of the way. I'm going to screw that in and do the bolt, and we'll come. So I'm now going to, having screwed that down, I'm now going to load this, and I've got 7 of these bolts. This takes 16 to 16.5 millimeter bolts. They go in one at a time. Get that first one in straight. You don't want it to go in too deep. There we go. So that one is in. The first one I find is the hardest. All the others after that just drop in very neatly. So that's 3, 4, 5, 6. Actually, that was 6. This is number 7. So that's fully loaded with 7 of them. And now we're going to do a quick demonstration of firing this into a target, and we'll see how it works. So I'm going to empty this out. We've got 7 rounds in the magazine, and we're going to cock this thing and fire it and get an impression of how fast this will fire. I'm going to be firing from the hip. My target is only about 1.5 meters away from me, so I don't have to worry too much about aiming. We'll be discussing in the next video the aiming system so we can fire from longer ranges, but just to demonstrate how quickly I can cycle through rounds on this particular weapon in its current condition. Now that's what we call an accident. And you'll notice how this arrow's popped off. And isn't it lucky that I wasn't holding it from the spur? Let's call that a demonstration, a safety demonstration, as to why you want the foregrip and not the spur, because that would have gone right into my hand. Let's try again. I would call that pretty quick. What do you think? Now there are a couple of little teething issues with this, which we'll go over in more detail in the next video, but overall this performs well. Obviously, because that only lifts this high, I can't use a speed loader with this. Although I can add rounds while shooting, so not necessarily a problem. The biggest teething issue I will point out relates to the safety. Now, a normal grip in my right hand has my thumb on the left-hand side of the weapon, where it can reach the safety, but it's a bit of a stretch. When using this, because if the safety is pulled back, it kind of jiggles back and forth, because this little shaped piece of metal prevented it from doing that before. So what I need to do is make sure that my thumb is on this side. So once I cock the weapon and I come forward with my right thumb on the right-hand side. Obviously, this is reversed if you're left-handed. But by coming forward and placing my thumb on that as I take a grip, I don't have to worry about it jamming on me. So it sort of automatically makes sure that the safety is off. Alternatively, if I pull back on it, I can make sure it's on so I can't accidentally squeeze the trigger. So I have to sort of control the safety manually. I can no longer really do it automatically the way I did before we did this modification. The other thing that's very important, by the way, and we did screw in the modified spring. If I hold this up very close to the camera, you'll see right in front of the safety, there's a little loop showing. If that's not showing, you haven't installed it correctly. So again, you want to make sure it's on that shelf with under just a little bit of tension, and you want to make sure that loop is actually showing down there, because if it's not, literally when you go to cock the weapon, all the arrows just try to fly out of the top of the magazine. This is not a problem if you've done it correctly, but it is a problem if you haven't. And if you haven't, that's what you have to correct. If I had to make a criticism of this particular magazine, a serious criticism, it would come down to just one thing, and that is it didn't come with any kind of detailed instructions on how to assemble it. Hopefully watching this video will save you the trouble of having to figure out certain things that I had to stop and take time to figure out before I could finish making the video. But does it work? Yes. And by the way, this design, it will take broadheads as well. So if you are using this in an actual self-defense or hunting context as a semi-automatic weapon, yeah, this is perfectly capable of killing. I'm not recommending you go out and shoot anyone or anything and kill it, but you need to be aware of the fact that this is capable of killing. And it's capable of taking arrowheads that will end the life of whatever you shoot at, particularly if you're getting it into the vital organs. Because if you're talking about shooting something in the vitals with a broadhead, you're going to cause massive bleeding, and that will lead to either severe injury at least, if not death. So again, if you're going to make one of these, it's not a toy. I am going to be adding the sight assembly. I have a twin sight assembly that I'm going to be adding onto this in the next video. And so I hope you'll come and see that one. If you haven't liked already, please consider hitting the like and share and the bell icon to let you know when the next video drops. I know this one took a little bit longer, but we had some things to figure out, and it took a little while because I had to mix it in with work and so forth. So it took me a little longer to get this one out. But next video will be more timely, promise. Right, I hope you enjoyed this. I look forward to seeing you again. Have a good one.